Good day, and welcome back to Shatter Our Souls with Novaria. Today we have a little bit of cleaning up to do before we hit the southern edge of the Hebra region. This is partially because I had forgotten how to do some of these side shrines in this area, as well as because I have to do a little bit of cleanup regarding the Teba side quest in order to even begin what would be the beginning of the main shrine quest, or rather, the divine beast quest of the Tabantha region. However, before we get started on that, we have to deal with a couple things. Number one, this stone tablet or stone plate here has a side mission where after you have completed the divine beast, you have to light a fire on top of this pad, if you will, and hope that you do enough that you're not going to end up with a... How do I want to word this? Hope that it does enough to keep you going, more or less. Oh, no, I do not want the red chew jelly to get damaged by these guys. Blue chews are actually one of the more versatile enemies and one that I personally enjoy, because blue chews have one of the more unique capabilities of having their drops change into whatever you might need, including white, yellow, and red chew jelly. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I need to light this fire and do so quick. So, why is it that this one is such a quote-unquote challenge? Reality is that a lot of these set something up and wait shrines show up in a few different regions. You have one in Tabantha, you have one in... I believe there's one in the Gerudo Highlands, there's one in the Gerudo mainland, they're all over the place. There's one in the Gerudo Highlands that is very bluntly just shoot a wall with an electric arrow. Something that I know I can't do. But the game itself, theoretically, as long as these shrines exist, there is the possibility of completing side quests that otherwise should not be completable, at least by the current rule set that I have involved. Quick reminder of what the rule set is. I need to be able to attempt to beat the game of Zelda Breath of the Wild in its entirety without the use of swords, bows, or shields. Simply because I want to see how far I can actually push the game without going overboard, if that makes sense. I want to know if it is at all possible and what the limits of that possibility actually are. Because if you look at certain games have very notable, I suppose, limitations set aside. I'm almost out of wood, and I'm almost out of time. The biggest limitation I have right now is that... Oh, no. Actually, yes. I need to use the red shoe jelly. Just set it down and, get the jelly between me and the wolf. Where's the wolf? There it is. So, a lot of the challenges, I want to see how they differ between one section to another, if that makes sense. Every single shrine in Breath of the Wild is completable under ordinary circumstances. But how the game changes and what types of solutions come up when you limit certain abilities is a very significant question in my mind. I want to know if it is possible to beat the game with the absolute bare minimums, because why wouldn't you? Who wouldn't want to know exactly what the bare minimum should be? and they give me cannons. So that's the more logistical reason behind this, is because why not? I did not know I could drop that like that. Okay. So, cannon. The big cannon has effectively one thing and one thing only. This is a timing challenge, which makes it pretty well pointless for a lot of this. It got stuck in the channel. Because this is effectively just a timing challenge for when to use bombs, there's not much to it. Wait for the right moment, and fire at will. Cannonball hits the target, and you're off to the races to the next shrine. That's really all there is to a lot of the more simplistic shrines. Now, if I'm being honest, as long as a shrine does not involve blue flame, which has been a notable problem, or have the requirement of the player being able to use arrows of any variety, theoretically, virtually any shrine is completable. Those two limitations are very specific due to the nature of what it is that shows up as a result. Anywho, as we're heading into the Hebra region now, I should probably mention a couple things. Number one, the Hebra region of the Breath of the Wild is the single most densely populated region of all of Hyrule in terms of the number of shrines that you can collect throughout your visit. This particular one still is part of Tabantha, but there are, I believe, 10 different shrines, all within Hebra, making it a minimum of 1/12 of the total number of shrines in the game, if my memory serves accurate. If it doesn't, it could be as many as 1/10 of it. Considering the fact that there are 14 major regions within Breath of the Wild, Hebra ends up being one of those regions that actually has a lot of potential and showcases a lot of more unique pathways to gaining power within the game. Anyways, welcome to Shawarvo Shrine. If you're a JoJo fan, I'm sure you'll love that. But Shawarvo Shrine is all about traveling across, effectively, wind gusts. This is your Wind Waker-esque shrine. That is entirely what the goal is for this shrine, is traversing the world, or the region, the shrine itself, by using what is effectively just vertical fan blades. And to a degree, I think that's a very good thing about this shrine, is it's kind of simplistic. It's easy enough to grasp the concept of what you're aiming for. The hard part is figuring out how to use the concept to its fullest in order to make it work the way you want it to. As shown, there's not a whole lot I can do, especially with only one stamina weed. Speaking of the stamina, the reason why I haven't upgraded it is simply due to the fact that I am planning on leveling up past a lot of my problems, especially where it comes to the major tests of strength. And having a absurd health pool is the first step in that plan of sorts. Anywho, there is one thing that is currently holding us back from entering Divine Beast Vom Meadow, and that is the target range. Now, the flight range shows up as a region where you are supposed to be able to meet, greet, and have a conversation with Teba, one of the Rito warriors descended from Revali, the great sage of wind. And This is all well and good. Teba is intentionally trying not to let the situation get to him. But virtually anybody could practice their airborne archery within the flight range. I say virtually because you need to be able to actually fly to make that happen. Okay, you can do that with arrows. Wonderful! So, the easy part is over. We know we can damage those without arrows. Therefore, the hard part is whether or not we can actually enter the flight range to begin the quote-unquote challenge and be able to access the end goal of the mission, shall we say. Great. So, for a while I was questioning whether or not the various sages would be helpful or hindrance depending on the circumstances that you are in. And there are some sages I think do great, and there are some that don't.
Yeah? I don't know you. And I'm actually pretty busy here. You should probably go.
Anywho, the four sages, or dare I say, the four champions of the modern era, being at this moment Teba, it's not Tulin, Teba, Riju, we have Sidon and Yonobo. Each of them have something that they struggle with comparatively to their predecessors. And so you end up with Rivali being an extremely pompous, very strong-willed warrior, somebody who is more than willing to showcase what he is capable of, and more than willing to point out other people's flaws, simply due to the fact that Rivali he's always sure of himself. He knows exactly what he wants to do, and how he wants to do it. He knows that Link is a Hylian, and that a Hylian with a single blade shouldn't be able to best him in combat, let alone knows outright that this human, this Hylian, has no chance of besting him in combat as it comes to the air. Something that Rivali is the absolute master of because he is the champion of the Rito and champion that pilots Divine Beast Vameta. Teba, on the other hand, is his descendant. Somebody who is dutifully trying to uphold the beliefs and mentality of Rivali as a whole. But he falls a little bit flat. He falls a little bit milder than the rest. As far as I recalled, I forgot who the Rito champion was for a long time between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Teba, among the four, I suppose you'd call them modern champions in Breath of the Wild, just doesn't stand out as much as the other three did. If he were to be the main hero of Breath of the Wild, he would fall unfortunately flat. And I'm going to say this for all four of the various heroes that are possible within Breath of the Wild as a whole. Each of them has a flaw that on their own they cannot complete the task of defeating Calamity Ganon. Teba's is ironically his stubborn side. He is not somebody who is very powerful in the traditional sense. He is somebody who is swift. He is somebody who understands his limitations, but is too stubborn to acknowledge them. Much like Rivali before him, he would effectively throw himself at Calamity Ganon or Meadow or the Divine Beasts time and time again, hoping for something to change. And the reality is, I don't believe that he would ever be able to beat Calamity Ganon, because he would have the same approach every time that he goes to defeat Ganon. That being, rushing in, fighting as best he can, and hoping for some miracle to fall his way. Yunobo is somebody I believe couldn't defeat Calamity Ganon on account of the fact that he would never try. See, the Goron champion of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, when he is actually himself, is a significantly less courageous hero than the other champions are. Sidon has this air about him that he is confident, he is powerful, he is ready to roll. It doesn't matter what Calamity Ganon or the world throws at him. He is going to do what he can do. And he will do it well. But he acknowledges his limitations. He is not exactly the greatest when it comes to electrical attacks. Something that, unfortunately, means that he can't shut down the pipeline powering Varuta. And so, he, of course, ends up in much the same circumstance as Teba, trying to throw himself at what would be an insurmountable threat. Because what else do you do? Something has to change, and he is going to be the one to change it if anything happens. But he doesn't have the capability to do so, at least not on his own. Let's go. Oh, geez. Oh, yes, right, the steel ball. And so, ironically, Sidon is probably my favorite among the champions to be able to actually beat Breath of the Wild without the necessity of another character. Sidon is my favorite for that. But what about Riju? Riju, the Gerudo champion, is much the same as Sidon, Yunobo, or even Teba. There's a flaw holding her back, but her flaw is not one of personality. I have to be very clear about this. Riju's flaw is not that she's too brash or unable to actually enact a plan or move forward with her goals. Riju's greatest flaw, greatest weakness, is her age. And I want to say this very I want to be very clear about what I mean when I say her age. She is incredibly young, ruler of the Gerudo, and ruler after the great Urbosa. A big set of shoes to fill. And so, she constantly compares herself to her predecessor, as effectively all of the modern champions do. But Riju also is a thinker. She plans ahead. She thinks about every possible solution before attempting to enact on one of them. This makes her probably the most valuable and most likely of the four to succeed. But she lacks the strength and durability to be able to actually battle against Calamity Ganon in a way that would actually make a difference in this circumstance. And so, the last of the modern champions is Link. And Link is, of course, the hero of Hyrule, the great wielder of the Blade of Evil's Bane. He is the one who is intended to defeat Calamity Ganon. And each of the other four are meant to support him. Now, I love this whole supporting role mentality, but I think what I like most about each of these supporting roles is that aside from Riju's ability, which is passed on through Urbosa, apart from Urbosa's ability, every single one of the champion abilities that come up in Breath of the Wild effectively make Link harder to kill. And on a very blunt statement, that is all they can actually accomplish. Ow. If you take Mipha's ability, Mipha's ability is on a very blunt one-to-one basis, effectively just to revive Link every 20 minutes. Well, it doesn't take much to waste 20 minutes in Breath of the Wild. In fact, I would argue it's one of the easiest games out there to waste 20 minutes and not even realize it. Rivali's Gale helps get Link out of circumstances that could be considered dangerous relatively quickly. But we could also go and say Daruk's protection allows him to deflect 3 separate attacks in a very short span of time. Perfectly. It effectively, 3 of the 4 champion abilities are meant to make Link a tank. An endless, unstoppable force. Or, dare I say, an immovable object. Doesn't matter what Calamity Ganon or the monsters of Hyrule throw at Link, he's not stopping. He's not slowing down. He is going to continue moving forward because that's what Link is. The Triforce of Courage never really grants Link any true capabilities. If anything, the Triforce generally grants the 3 wielders with higher than average stamina or higher than average magical affinity, but at no point in time does it actually grant greater power in a respect. You can see this in Twilight Princess, where Link bests the wielder of the Triforce of Power in raw strength, without the use of any special abilities, tools, you name it. Just the sword and the past experiences being a farmhand and showcasing just how far he can push the various capabilities as a hero to the test. And Zelda will never be able to best Ganon in raw strength. This I will never argue. But I bet you that she can cast spells that are far more powerful than what Ganon would ordinarily do so. Ganon is known for creating curses or living magic. This is something that comes up actually a lot in Zelda, is this idea of living magic. If you look at certain monster types in really the entire franchise, a few things come to mind. When you look at Skyward Sword, you have Girahim's bokoblins that crop up on a regular basis that are alive, but they're not born, they are created. The same magic that effectively makes Girahim a threat creates and maintains these monsters over a longer span of time. And you could argue this for multiple creatures and multiple games as a whole. If you looked at Minish Cap, 95% of all monsters came from the chest of evil that was created to effectively trap dark magic and prevent it from spreading across Hyrule, sealed with the Picori Blade. But let's get a little more specific, shall we? What about Redeads? Redeads are just animated dark magic. And these beings, especially in Ocarina of Time, are incredibly potent, incredibly notable for being dark magic incarnate, and admittedly looking like a zombie or terrifying the heck out of most young children, but Redeads have always been more of that kind of mentality, where they exist as, I don't want to say an anomaly. They're not necessarily an anomaly, but they are a magical entity that far surpasses a lot of individuals' expectations. But also, let's look at the bosses of Ocarina of Time. The first boss, Queen Goma, was said to have been a curse placed on the Deku Tree by a dark man from the desert. If you look at Dodongo, or King Dodongo, the leader of the Gorons, Darunia, mentions that they showed up in incredible numbers and incredible size in very short order. It's not necessarily outside the realm of expectations that Ganon would use very similar capabilities to allow him to block off the Gorons, which are an incredibly powerful race, from attacking or defending themselves against his onslaughts. Baronade, making Jabu Jabu sick, is another basic magic that effectively is, again, attacking a deity within the Zelda universe. But you can also take this a step further. Phantom Ganon was another curse, or another being created from dark magic by Ganon in order to eliminate the possibility of a sage awakening. Volvagia did the same. Same with Morpha, same with Twinrova. Although Twinrova was not a magical entity of Ganon's creation, it was another magical entity. And so you end up with a situation where most of the bosses, especially in the Ocarina of Time era, were created by dark magic. Now, each game tends to have its own specified way of bosses being created. If you look at Breath of the Wild, it's the Ganon Blights, or the magic of Calamity Ganon bringing back the monsters from the dead. That's fine. Ocarina of Time has the afflictions of curses and past enemies coming back to life. Twilight Princess has the Mirror of Twilight diffuse shadows, or Twilight magic in general, affecting the bosses. But you can also take this a step further in a lot of cases with entities in other games. A lot of the bosses in Wind Waker were actually bosses that existed prior to Ganon ever getting involved, with the ones that come to mind as being directly his influence being the Helmarok King, Jelhala, Mulgera, as well as the Phantom Ganons. It's very common through line that there is some form of magical entity involved in most of the Zelda bosses. And I think that is a good thing, because it's a very simple, oh yeah, this creature was here before, or this creature was created for this specific purpose. But a lot of Zelda falls into the curses realm. I don't necessarily think that's perfect, but at least it gives the player base something to latch onto as, hey, this is what happened. But tell me about your favorite boss origin in Zelda, because honestly, I probably know less than half of them. The ones that I find funny or the best are the ones that existed long before the threat ever did. These being like Mulderak, the thousand-year arachnid from Skyward Sword, the giant chew jellies from Minish Cap on account of they're just a regular enemy, you're just tiny, and the Ganon Blights themselves, while I don't necessarily think they have the best origin, at least have something that is easy enough for the player to latch onto. Oh yeah, magical entity created by Calamity Ganon's magic, bada bing, bada boom, big threat to the world. Okay, move on. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but I would say it at least gives you something to work with. And that is not going to light a fire that way. No siree. So, at the moment, we are at the Hebra Tower. And the Hebra Tower is going to be kind of well, it's going to be a little bit of a short visit, to be honest. We have to wait for the boulders to melt, climb the tower, get our map, and we'll get a reasonable guesstimation of how many shrines there are in this area. And the beautiful thing about this region in particular is that most of it is, I suppose, quest-based. You have at least 3 that come to mind that are unique. You have the bird in the mountains, where you have to get to a certain peak and look in a certain direction to see the opening within the caverns underneath, which I thought was pretty cool. You have the maze. You have the 2 giant snowball shrines. You have the shrines encased in ice. There's a lot of more overworld interaction in the Hebra region, which I personally enjoy. I think that Breath of the Wild had a lot going for it in terms of the overworld exploration, something that I wish that they leaned a little heavier into in later, or in its sequel. I always felt that Tears of the Kingdom, it had overworld exploration, don't get me wrong, but it always left me wanting more. It always left me feeling that there was something else, something more that I was missing, that I could get invested in. But Tears of the Kingdom had a really bad habit of dropping the ball when it mattered most, in my opinion. Now, Tears of the Kingdom has a few things. The Sky Islands, for example, are, or were, an absolutely phenomenal idea to bring back. But the problem was that they were too copy-paste. Almost every single Sky Island fit them effectively a mold. Every single one of them had kind of the same 4 or 5 basic ideas or identities, and that was it. The ones that stood out at a distance, which is both absolutely phenomenal, because it meant that you had a lot to work with, but also left a lot to be desired, because it became less of a challenge of which ones have it, which ones have I explored, and more of a how do I get to that one mentality. And while a few of their mentalities and goals, like the anti-gravity sections, were absolutely phenomenal, I would not pass up on that, a lot of it just kind of felt cheap. However, one thing I do believe that the modern Zelda, specifically Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, do exceptionally well, is the fact that they actually take the time to build up more unique challenges and really force your hand in terms of solving puzzles and actually engaging with the world as a whole. Now, this sounds really silly. Of course you have to engage with the world as a whole, but it's more than just getting to each of the power nodes or 5 points of interest, the 5 locks. You have to solve puzzles and interact with the dungeon in a myriad of ways to be able to access these major locations, these major spots that are meant to be important to the overall world and gameplay of the region. Anywho, I would like to thank you for keeping an eye on this for the last half an hour. And we're going to finish off one last shrine. And it is I believe it's the Guiding the Wind shrine. And the goal of this shrine is very simple. You have to block off a couple wind spots to make sure that your orb that you use ends up going where you want it to go. Perfect. That's pretty easy. And done. And now we have one other thing that needs to happen. And that is, we need to just drop the orb in the wind and let the orb do its job for us. The nice thing about a lot of these more puzzle-based shrines is once you know them, it's really hard not to do it right. But there's often at least a little bit of thought put into it. Anywho, next time, we're going to start off at the Great Maze of the Hebra region. If you like what you see, drop a like, leave a subscribe, and we'll catch you next week. Until then, have a good one.